A long time has passed since the introduction to our 10 champions we currently have in Destiny. And I have wanted to make this video ever since the release of Shadowkeep. But due to some personal reasons I never came around to fully develop it. Until recently. Not to mention, what better way to maybe get some attention to the channel than to have an open opinion on the internet that everyone will tell me I'm in the wrong to have. So, major spoilers everyone! But this video is my opinion, alright? If you generally love the champions in Destiny, there is nothing wrong with it. I respect your opinion if you respect mine. We are allowed to disagree and agree on many things in life. My opinion should not be taken as a fact no matter what, because opinions can never be a fact. And you can disagree with all my points, that's completely fair. And your opinion is as equally valid as mine are. And I like to mention this. I'm talking from the perspective of a PvE guardian who hasn't done a Grandmaster of the time of this recording, maybe because I consider them quite lazy and stupid. And I will only talk about champions from their base appearance, like the ones found on the Moon Patrol up till Master level Nightfalls. Alright, now for the people who are still here, let me share my view on the champions in Destiny 2. Now to begin with, what is a champion? To me, it sounds like a powerful enemy that can but doesn't have to resemble a familiar enemy but with its own unique looks, has a greater challenge in a fair and fun way, as well as letting you defeat it in whatever way you want to. As an example, look at Bloodborne. There are these enemies, which are simple enough. Now, look at this boy. This is a champion to me. Resembles the smaller version yet still has its own unique look, is more challenging and lets you fight it in any way you feel like. If I use a less damaging weapon or a bad weapon for fighting them, I am only punishing myself and not being punished by the developers, as they gave me freedom to use whatever I want. This is not the case for Destiny 2's champions, however. Let me show you. Sure, they do resemble the less powerful enemies, but they are just normal enemies reskinned. And their challenge is really bad. Either is way too easy, making them super uninteresting to fight and barely noticeable, like raid champions. I've had the same answer pop up many times when mentioning the fact that Garden of Salvation and the Deepstone Crypt raid actually have champions in them. I didn't even remember them being there. Were they ever a thing? Oh, I can't remember them actually being there. And on the other side, they can be way too challenging, making them a big bowl of Captain Crunch new vomit flavored cereal and a massively unfair fight. Like any champion from Hero difficulty Nightfalls and up, are just awful. Tell me, when you have an overload captain that never stands still, barrier servitors being able to just protect enemies against any damage and its shield goes through solid objects, or an unstoppable ogre one-shot you from its melee, is that fun for anyone really? You'd have more fun getting kicked in the nuts by your entire family tree than that. On the topic of being one-shotted, let me compare an unstoppable ogre to another one-shot enemy. The only time a one-shot is fair is if there's ways to prevent it. Take Dark Souls for instance with their infamous mimics. They have a grab attack that can result in a one-shot kill, but that's a good design. Here's why. You can prevent this by not opening the mimic and leaving it alone, as it doesn't outright attack or pursue you. You can look at its distinct chain position to know that it is a mimic, so you know if you should open it or not. You can hit it so it does other attacks, and heck, you can even make the mimic have a little nap so you can safely grab the loot. Plenty of ways to counter the one shot, as well as giving the player no restrictions on what to use for this situation. Now, let's look at an unstoppable ogre. Or as I like to refer to them as, haha, you died, get it? Oh, it's so funny that you died, and you were not even given a fair chance at stopping it. Champion. You get one-shotted when you're too close, so no close range whatsoever. Already a restriction to the way you want to play. It will always chase you, unless you're hiding for far too long, making it a super boring fight. And the only way to prevent a one-shot is to stay at far enough range to not be decimated by ridiculous over-the-top damage, or to wait for the unstoppable bullet to proc on your gun, making it super risky sometimes to survive while waiting, but also to land the shot when being shot at. And if you're not staggering it, you'd have to deal with an HP pool so huge that it would make a full team of Behemoth's Titans feel jealous, feeling more like a hemorrhoid-infused bullet sponge rather than something fun and interesting to fight. Sure, you could use your super and use some of that bonus armor to survive, maybe, but even then, most times it's a one-shot anyway. And I'm pretty sure that there's other situations in the same activity to use your super for than to waste it on one bulky shit. Unless we're talking about Falling Star or Celestial type exotics. And to add further insult to this injury, they can even one-shot you when you're about to finish them! And it doesn't make it any better when you're playing like a Nightfall and no one is using something for unstoppable champions. And this is not me implying that they should do something that I don't want to do, okay? I just want all these stupid champions to not force us to use things we don't want to use. Because oftentimes, we have our builds that we want to use. We want to be our own characters, instead of being forced to utilize something we don't want to use. It's as simple as that. You advertised it like we can play our own way, so let us play our own way then. Destiny is an FPS MMORPG. I want to roleplay as my character and use whatever I want. This isn't a single player experience where there's restrictions due to the fact that you're playing a character like Sonic and not your own character. But back to the mechanics of taking down champions. This whole mechanic of taking down champions is the equivalent of playing Minecraft and you're not allowed to kill creepers unless they have already been hit by an arrow from a stray and a skeleton during daytime, and the only weapon you can use in order to kill it is a stone sword. Although, very exaggerated of course, but my point still stands. Why can't I just kill it with my own means? You're literally putting in so many unnecessary steps to fight one enemy. This isn't a raid boss. And this is without mentioning the fact, going back to the mimics, that the mimics are rarely something mandatory to kill in order to progress the game. However, with unstoppable ogres and many other champions, they're quite often very mandatory to kill in order to go anywhere. Like, you have to kill all of them in strikes in order to get your loot. If you miss one, it never spawn, glitches out or despawn, then you're screwed. You will still get a little bit of a reward, but not everything you could have had, and their quote-unquote challenge isn't even remotely good or fair. I should be able to kill them with anything I want without being punished for it. But no, I must die because I wanted to play the game my own way, and not in the way Bungie wants me to play. And this argument goes to all champions. I hate the fact that there's so many restrictions, how poor, unfair and downright lazily designed these enemies are, and how often they must appear for the sake of having more challenging enemies and activities with little to no compensation for it. Getting back to the unstoppable champions. The ogres are definitely one of the worst ones. Too aggressive, way too high DPS, and just takes the piss out of me. Completely unfair and boring enemy. Next, we have the unstoppable Taken Phalanx. These phalanxes suffer the same trait as the ogres, but they are slightly more fair, due to the fact that you can avoid their one-shot melee by going behind them or jumping over them, which lets you fight them with a sword much easier, and even shotguns. They don't appear all too often at the time of this video being made, so I don't have as big of a distaste for them, but they still give me PTSD whenever I see them. Lastly, amongst these ones, we have the unstoppable Incendior, which to me is even more fair than the last two, because it feels like a more beefed up version of its less powerful enemy type in a good way, and it doesn't one-shot you all the time. They allow pretty much any form of method to take them down with. So these guys, I'm a little bit more chill with. But these are by far the best champions, solely because they don't generate their health. Otherwise, they would have been an absolute nightmare. Moving on, we have Overload champions, aka the annoying spammy McGinnises that will kill you from the abundance of stress they force into your body. These guys always generate their health, unless they're stunned, but good luck getting them stunned though. Overload captains never sit still long enough to land your shots on them, And if you do, they can still teleport far away from where you stunned them and lose your only shot at taking them down. And the amount of ground each teleportation can cover is greater than the Lockheed SR-171 Blackbird can cover at top speed. Not even the Flash can beat these suckers. And the audacity Bungie has to say that we need to land more than one shot with overload hand cannons on them is dreadful. And don't even get me started on how ludicrous their tracking is when they are using shock rifles. Then there's the overload Minotaurs that can charge, teleport and spam meanie fatmans at your feet. And never forget about their killer combo final blow guaranteed to kill you karate chop! And finally, we arrive at the overload taken hobgoblins that never stop shooting its sniper beam and its homing projectiles. And these projectiles home on you so aggressively that I believe that's what Croxelmar got inspired from when they made their lineup of exotic rocket launchers. This champion is at least more stationary than the other overloads, but instead it gets to have more of an advantage because of its damage output. Man, some great difficulties right here. Having to land a bullet on an enemy that constantly moves, and as soon as you shoot, it teleports closer towards you, pretty much dodges all of your bullets, and its bullets never miss you, or you have to try to hit a tank that is ready to destroy you as soon as your hair is spotted. So fair. Much fun. It's like if you were practicing with a bow, right? But the instructor kept moving your target faster than you can blink and being like, aim better, dipshit, you're bad at this. And the Taken one is like playing Endless Veil, and as soon as you peek in the middle of the arena, the entire other team is already there, lined up with snipers. Like, I don't consider this a challenge. I think it's downright annoying and more like troll behavior if anything. Last but certainly not least, Barrier Boys. Surname, slight breeze on my toes and I panic pop my Word of Dawn. Each Barrier Boyo has its own baloney that makes you suffer twice the national average of migraines in one moment of just seeing them. There's Barrier Colossuses that behaves more like an unstoppable champion with its never-ending spree of shitwater and one-shot ground stomps. And they become even more fun when you add in the fact that some of them have the slug launcher and can just outright damage you through walls. Fun. You may say that the Taken captains can already damage you through solid objects, and yes they can, and I do agree that that shouldn't be a thing either. Then we have the barrier servitors that have an incredibly stupid range to shield other combatants through solid objects, and you cannot hurt any of them unless you use your super or stun the champion. Am I seriously the only one bothered by this? Any enemy that you're trying to kill could just get within its long range and be immediately shielded and just kill me. I have the bare minimum of a chance to actually survive that long to stop the shielding a lot of the time. And when you combine these servitors with just one overload captain, which can be shielded by the servitor champion, then you really have the ultimate weapon that would surpass Metal Gear. It is so painful to see that happen. Like, Freddy Krueger couldn't craft that kind of nightmares. Lord Megatron considers this to be way more evil than any other Decepticon. And then there's barrier hobgoblins and knights that are unfathomably stupid in their fire rate and damage, which makes them kill you faster than you can even pull down their shields. The funnest part of all of them is how they can just use their shields like they're all running Memory of Radagast and deflect literally everything coming towards them. Now that's a good April Fool's video idea for you Fallout plays. By the way, why do these guys have to heal? They're called barrier champions, not barrier loads or over barriers. Like, is there a definition hidden deep within the word barrier that I am unaware of? I don't think so. So I looked it up. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a barrier is an object like a fence that prevents people from moving forward from one place to another. No mention of regenerating or healing. So these champs just stole Overload's gimmick, and we're just gonna be okay with that? No! No, we shouldn't be okay with that. Good difficulty doesn't come from cranking up the enemy's fire rate, damage output, range, movement speed, health pool, etc. without giving the player a good compensation for it. Something that isn't equal to a boss should never have lots of restrictions on what to use in order to take them down. We're talking about something that gets way too challenging way too fast because of its horrible endgame scaling and has its own way of saying, must have requirements in order to just hurt me, otherwise you're bad. It would be like playing any strike, but every boss can only be taken down by a certain weapon, which they don't have, and nor does any raid boss. Imagine doing Riven, and you cannot hurt her unless everyone is using Kvastov, and it doesn't even deal any bonus damage. Like, seriously, these champions are so absurd. The Taken are a good example of what a more challenging enemy type is. Unique abilities that challenge the player in a fair way and make them think differently when fighting them. But even then, the Taken has recently been ruined with how upscaled they are in the Harbinger mission and the Prophecy dungeon. Like, really? The fix to Prophecy was to increase the Scion's cloning rate? Really? Bungie, are you back when From made Dark Souls 2 and said, you know what, this is good, right? But how about we make it worse and even more challenging? Because we never got our favorite Scooby-Doo toy as a kid and we want to hear more people scream. These champions remind me in many ways of Dark Souls 2 as well, where there are highly aggressive enemies that never stand still, have way too much health to the point it feels more like you're fighting a boss out in the open, and can't stop, won't stop attacking enemies. And on a further side note, isn't it a fitting comparison? A sequel to a really popular and well-selling title that focuses on what many complain about from the first one, the PvP being awful, so the sequel makes it much better but destroys the PvE side. Until Stasis comes around. Anyway, this has to be one of the worst designed enemies I have ever seen. To me, they feel like a big middle finger to the people who just want to enjoy the game. These guys are so bad, they don't even have PNGs of them on Google, so I had to make my own for this video. And that's saying something. I'd rather fully watch a YouTube ad than fight these. I am dead fucking serious. To truly showcase my inner feelings whenever I see the slightest hint of the bottom left corner of my screen saying, a champion has appeared. This is what it basically feels like. This situation is so atrocious and over the top, you'd have a much fairer challenge trying to fight God himself. These champions even make cockroaches be like...
I'm quite aware that I'm a chunky and tanky little bastard, but by the oldest of Josh and Goshes, you, my sir, are all making us look so insignificant, and frankly, we do not enjoy this sour taste you've given us, So, pretty please, cease, you horrendous, lazy-designed, fat cunt. Marvelous.
They could have just been like the ultras you kill in the beginning of Shattered Throne, just as tanky but with unique and fun attributes. But no, they instead took those ultras, blended them together with the very essence of Hell's combined hatred, broken and lazily designed mechanics, and a massive pile of ball dookie, and then shaped it into these freaks. Then you throw in the fact that each season only a few selection of weapons gets to have the specific bullet mods that has to take up a spot or two in your gauntlet slots, and you cannot use both a exotic that already has a champion bullet built into it with a season mod. No Ariana with unstoppable hand cannon mod. No Lament and Disruption Blade for overloads. Even more restrictions, everyone. This is the future. Just so dumb. Just as dumb as the whole concept that to wait for the goddamn champion to cool down before you can stun them again. Like, are you serious? More waiting just to kill one enemy. Thank God Divinity against Overloads has no wait. Just shoot once and they're stunned. Speaking of Ariana, is this also a way for the team to design exotics nowadays? Just to say, this exotic can stun champions and that's it? Like really? When will Leviathan's Breath ever actually be used besides taking down unstoppable champions? And even then you rarely see it being used to take them down. Same thing with Devil's Ruin, except for maybe in the Crucible. but I barely ever played the Crucible, so I wouldn't know. And then there's exotic armors that have also begun this champion trend with their first shot at it, Athrea's Embrace. But at least it has more power beyond just stunning the champion part. But then there's also exotics that can kill champions because of how good they are. Celestial, Star Eater, Falling Star, Geomag, you name them. Please, don't ever nerf exotics that let me just outright kill these monsters. That's like the only fun there is for me. Killing the most hated enemy type of mine with something I know will do that job. One-shot them with Celestial and Falling Star. God tier feeling. And another thing that allows me to combat them is Stasis. It is not a bad thing for the game. It allows me to freeze them and prevent them from using their stupid and lazily designed powers, so I can actually erase them faster. Like, if there is a barrier Colossus, I could just toss a Duskfield grenade on top of it, and he will be frozen multiple times before he can even be allowed to utilize his stupid joke of a gimmick. It's so much fun to see that happen. Their jokey mechanic being broken by something equally broken, at least to the Crucible players. I sometimes want to see these programmers actually solo everything they make, just to see if they actually think it's all fair and fun all the time, cause you gotta wonder sometimes, what's their thought process? Make it more stupid just cuz? Increase the odds of getting headaches? It's like they only watch the over-the-top players like Esoteric that was chosen by the goddamn architects to solo everything ever. Absolute mad lad. And I'm no Esoteric, alright? I'm just a typical raid and PvE guardian. So the fact that I have to deal with these insane levels of crap in like every activity at this point is just so exhausting. I'm honestly surprised that not every dungeon, normal strikes, and even Gambit at this rate have champions for the sake of challenge. And I bet they're gonna shove all the champions they can into the master tier dungeons if I ever get them. And I mean, in a game where everything has lore associated with it, like so much of that we have lore explanations for what our engrams are, the loot that contains our actual loot has lore in it. And even exogenitalia. Like, come on! But where do the champions fit in? Like, I understand that they are a game mechanic, but really, what are they? If they were just Hive and Vex, you could say they are units using darkness and it makes sense. But what about the Cabal and the Fallen ones then? Cabal sure doesn't seem like they want to use the darkness anytime soon. Fallen? I could see that, if the Fallen champions were only in Beyond Light with Aramis. Lore-wise, they seem like something that doesn't really belong here, or were given barely any thought to. Same can be said about their implementation as well. And I've yet to show how broken and buggy these enemies are. Just look at these examples!
I forgot I was on the mom floor.
No, let me why can't I? This is just so stupid. I am aware that the health returns all of a sudden thing happens in more cases and has been around ever since the launch of Destiny 2. But you throw that factor into this mess, and it just makes me suffer even more. Like, the last thing I'd wish to happen is to have an already overpowered enemy suddenly just get back all of its health, forcing me to fight it for much longer and not have any fun whatsoever. I seriously can't ever imagine anyone defending these horrible creations. You wanna know what a champion is and looks like in Destiny? Wyverns. I can't express how much I love them. A perfect example of a champion. Wyverns doesn't restrict you from using whatever you want. They have no BS mechanic. They have multiple weak points, can be staggered, are unique and interesting looking, and are challenging with their special projectiles, and heavily telegraph their attacks. Wyverns to me is the right version of a champion. And yes, before you say anything, I am fully aware that they can teleport behind you and kill you really easily. But how often do they use that ability compared to an overload captain? Wyverns tend to just slowly and menacingly approach the player while shooting at them, and the projectiles can be dodged. You can get a fun rhythm from them, assuming you just know which range to be in. And even more compliments towards them, they are really big, making it easy to land your shots. And the tendrils are like a warning sign if you're doing a really high level activity, like a shark fin. Comparing that to a champion, which pretty much only gets a small text announcement, they then give you barely any time to react. They just appear and then you either have already stunned them or you're already dead. But with Wyverns, they basically took a Minotaur and a Harpy and boom, unique and fun enemy. Instead of just adding a different color palette to an already existing enemy and just increasing its fire rate, damage, health pool, armor and annoying factor and then saying, "Hey, these guys don't care about your builds at all. Use what we want you to use in order to fight me." Because if you're gonna limit us down to only a few options in order to combat your cancer-filled abominations, and at the same time nerf the tools that make it fun to kill them with, Destiny should not be allowed to be called an RPG anymore, as you're taking out the role-playing part of it and making the game less fun. And besides, if I must use Lament for every champion ever, it will get so boring in one way for me. I often customize my character a lot to suit my current mood, but in these cases, I can't use Acreus because it's too slow. My favorite, Sleeper Simulant, does not have enough damage. Rockets with boss spec? Yeah, sure. Machine guns are even a joke with Warple and boss spec. And I don't want to use Lament all the time. And then I have to see them nerfing it so many times, I feel punished for using it. When it's kinda like the only weapon that puts any sort of damage into a champion that you designed for us, Bungie, you ruin the only fun ways to kill your god-awful creations. But I can list something positive about them though. Only credit I can give the champions, and I mean the only credit, is their appearance. They look cool. I mean, just look at them. I wish more captains had an overload look to them. Or more ogres look so beefed up. I mean, have you seen those barrier hobgoblins? Remember back in Destiny 1, where there were no champions, and where challenge came from normal enemies just getting buffed from modifiers? And when you could use any weapon to kill them? That was fun, wasn't it? Don't get me wrong, I had a really hard time with Year 1 Omnigul Nightfalls, and even the Thorn Strike. But I think that's a greater challenge, and more fun to play than to have a fight against these champions. Also, if a Nightfall was brought up to a really high difficulty level, in Year 3 of Destiny 1, they gave us one of the best modifiers ever, Daybreak, which should be something in master level difficulty Nightfalls and Grandmasters. Don't even at me. Cause why are we playing games? To have fun, right? Not to feel more depressed or bad about ourselves than real life already makes us feel. I already have a headache from sitting in traffic all day. I don't need another one when I come home and I just want to enjoy a game, okay? And Daybreak made for a really fun experience while still keeping the challenge up. It allowed our abilities to recharge as if we were playing Mayhem in the Crucible, but buffing up everything we fought in the Nightfall. It was so fun, and I miss having that level of fun in Destiny 2 nowadays. But you see, I don't actually hate the champions in of itself. I am fully behind the idea and the concept of having something new to fight. And I think champions is a good idea that just isn't well executed at all. I want to like the system, but I have listed all the things that make it unenjoyable to me. So seeing how these champions are gonna stay, I'd now like to share some changes I would have made to the champion system so it will be a more enjoyable experience, at least to me. So, if the champions remain the same, like they are now, then I'd change the system itself. The artifact champion mods for your weapons should be turned into unlockables that become active as soon as unlocked and would not be required to be slotted into any armors or weapons. That way, as soon as you equip a weapon that matches the bullet type, it would immediately have it. And exotics with these mods should be able to stack with additional ones, because I think we want to feel powerful and have more fun, right? These mods would also be completely turned off in the Crucible, because God forbid anything existed in the Crucible ever. The bullet mods would be the ideal damage dealers to their respective champion, like boss spec is for bosses. Unstoppable bullets should be able to stagger their champions way easier and deal more damage to them. Overload damage should prevent the respective champion from regenerating its health and deal bonus damage to them. Anti-barrier rounds should destroy their shields much easier and pierce through shields like it's still doing, and of course deal more damage to its champion. Or I'd rework the champions, and this is how I'd rework them. All champions should have less endgame scaling, they should be like other enemies' difficulty behavior, and not be turned up by 4 billion% in all of their attributes. The only thing that they should be buffed on is their health and armor, to still keep a challenge of taking them down. Think of them like Randall the Vandal, the Perfected, Nightmare, or whatever title he has nowadays. Additionally, I don't think these guys should be turned into a completely immovable joke once stunned. They should still be an attacking enemy to keep the pressure up like all the other enemies, but with less overwhelming damage output. Barrier champions, they should not have health regen. Their shield should not be a complete Ward of Dawn, but rather more of a banner shield, aka Middle Tree Sentinel, that can be destroyed if enough damage is applied to it, or easily broken by an anti-barrier bullet. This also leads to the possibility to go behind these champions and still do damage while the shield is up if you don't use the bullet mod and don't want to waste ammo on the shield. The servitor shielding should not go through objects, and enemies shielded by a barrier servitor should be able to be damaged by anti-barrier bullets. Barrier colossuses should not have a one-shot ground stomp whatsoever, and they shouldn't be able to shoot through solid objects. Unstoppable ogre and unstoppable taken phalanxes should not be able to one-shot at all. Their melee should be really powerful, but leave you with enough of a chance of surviving it so that the people who want to fight them at close range can. And they should not be unstaggerable, but rather just be able to tank more damage than most enemies. While an unstoppable bullet should make them flinch and stagger like if a ogre were being shot by a machine gun, or more or less make them stagger more often and easier. Overload should still regenerate health, but more like the anti-barrier champions do now. If no damage has been dealt for some time, then they heal, rather than it being a constant thing. Overload Minotaur should not be able to run teleport while shooting. Captain should still be able to teleport, but less times than compared to now. Overload taken Hobgoblins should not be able to spam fire their Seekers unless the Seekers' damage were being brought down. But the one change that would be in any of these cases, the only change that I feel like Bungie could make, if they really wanted to, is that
no champion should ever be able to kill you when you're about to finish them.
That has been my personal view on the Champions of Destiny 2. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there, Guardians.